I never thought I would become my parents' landlord. At 32 years old, I went from being kicked out of my childhood home after losing my tech job to secretly buying that very same house and tripling their rent. They called me a failure when I was down on my luck, said I was a burden, as they watched me pack my belongings in garbage bags. Now I own a multi-million-dollar company, and they have no idea that the property management company sending them late payment notices is actually controlled by their son. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on my parents, let me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe if you have ever had family members who only valued you for your success. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood outside Boston, in a modest colonial-style house my parents purchased the year before I was born. My father Richard worked as a financial advisor with a reputation for being strict and uncompromising both at work and at home. My mother Diane was a real estate agent, who typically deferred to my father in all major decisions, including how I was raised. From my earliest memories, my parents made it clear that success was expected, not celebrated. A 95% on a math test would be met with questions about the missing 5%. My father had a particular phrase he repeated throughout my childhood: "In this world, you are either a success or a failure. There is no in between." Despite their harsh standards, I showed an early aptitude for computers. By 14, I was building basic websites for local businesses, earning a few $100s for each project. My father viewed this as a nice hobby, but insisted it was no substitute for academic excellence that would lead to a prestigious college and a stable, respectable career. Throughout high school, I maintained a careful balance of meeting my parents' academic expectations while secretly nurturing my passion for coding. Each achievement was acknowledged with a brief nod before the next higher expectation was laid out. Each disappointment was met with days of cold silence or lengthy lectures about responsibility and potential. I was accepted to Northeastern University with a partial scholarship to study computer science. My parents expected a full scholarship and made their disappointment known by requiring me to work part-time throughout college to cover the difference. Looking back, I am actually grateful for this, as it gave me practical experience, while my peers were focused solely on academics. When I graduated during a tech boom in 2015, I landed a job at a growing Boston tech firm. Starting as a junior developer, I worked 80-hour weeks to prove my value. By 27, I had been promoted 3 times and was earning a 6-figure salary that allowed me to rent a luxury apartment in downtown Boston. Only then did my parents finally show something resembling pride. My father began mentioning my job to his clients. My mother invited me to her real estate office parties, introducing me as my son, the tech executive. For the first time, I felt I had earned their approval, though it was clearly tied to my financial success rather than who I was as a person. During my free time, I developed an innovative concept for a privacy-focused social media platform. While major platforms were making headlines for data breaches and privacy concerns, I envisioned an alternative where users maintained complete control of their information. Then in 2020, the economic recession hit the tech sector particularly hard. Despite my strong performance reviews, my company announced massive layoffs, and I found myself without a job at age 30. I applied to dozens of positions, but the entire industry was contracting. Companies that had been hiring aggressively were now conducting layoffs of their own. After 6 months of unemployment, my savings dwindled alarmingly. My apartment lease was ending, and I faced a difficult decision. Swallowing my pride, I called my parents and asked if I could move back home temporarily, while continuing to develop my app idea and search for new employment. They agreed, but with clear conditions. I had 6 months to get back on my feet, and I would need to contribute to household expenses once I found work. I moved into my childhood bedroom, surrounded by old trophies and certificates that suddenly felt like artifacts from a different life. The first month was tense, but manageable. I converted a corner of the basement into a makeshift office and spent 14 hours a day coding my prototype and applying for jobs. My father would occasionally walk past, peering over my shoulder with thinly veiled skepticism. By the second month, his patience began to wear thin. "Have you considered something more stable?" he would ask while I worked. "Technology is too volatile. Your cousin Michael works in insurance and never worries about layoffs." My mother was less direct, but equally undermining. Janet's son took a pay cut to work in banking after his startup failed, she mentioned casually over dinner. He has excellent benefits now. Very sensible decision. I tried to explain that my app had real potential, that investors were already showing interest in the prototype. I showed them user testing feedback and market research, supporting the need for privacy-focused platforms. Their eyes would glaze over, unimpressed by anything that was not an immediate paycheck. 3 months into my stay, I discovered my father had been going through my mail. At dinner that night, he and my mother ambushed me with an intervention of sorts. "We found your credit card statements," he announced, sliding the opened envelopes across the table, "and the letters about your student loan deferral. You went through my mail." I asked, shocked by the invasion of privacy. "We have a right to know the financial situation of someone living under our roof," he replied unapologetically. My mother added softly, as if it made the violation better, "We are just concerned about you, dear." Before I could respond, my father delivered the blow. "You have 30 days to find another place to live." I stared at them in disbelief. "I told you I needed 6 months. The tech industry is still recovering. My app is almost ready for investor pitching." "You are 30 years old and a complete failure," my father said, his voice cold and clinical. "We did not raise you to be a burden." I looked to my mother for support, but she stared at her plate, refusing to meet my eyes. "This is temporary," I pleaded. "Everyone faces setbacks. I just need a little more time." My father's response cut deep. "Success is not temporary, and neither is failure. It is time you learned that." The next morning they watched stone-faced as I packed my belongings into garbage bags and plastic bins. No boxes, no help offered. My childhood room was to be converted into a home office, my mother explained, as if I were a temporary inconvenience now being cleared away. As I loaded my car with everything I could fit, my father stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "Perhaps this will be the motivation you need to make something of yourself," he said, as if he were doing me a favor. I drove away with no destination, making desperate calls to friends, until my college roommate Jake offered his couch in a cramped downtown apartment. As I unfolded the lumpy couch that night, homelessness narrowly avoided the hurt transformed into something harder and colder. This rejection would eventually fuel the most significant decisions of my life. Jake's one-bedroom apartment became my home base for the next phase of my life. His generosity came with cramped quarters, a bathroom shared with 3 others in the building, and the constant smell of the Thai restaurant below. But it was shelter, and for that, I was immensely grateful. I found a job at a nearby coffee shop, working morning shifts that started at 5 a.m. The pay was minimal, but it covered my contribution to Jake's rent and left just enough for ramen noodles, canned soup, and the occasional splurge on fast food. Each night after my shift, I would work on my app until 2 or 3 in the morning, sleeping just a few hours before starting again. During those 3 months after my eviction, I had 0 contact with my parents. No calls, no texts, no emails. My sister Emily would occasionally message to check on me, but she knew better than to push for reconciliation. "They are still talking about how you need to learn responsibility," she reported after a Sunday dinner at their house. "Dad says tough love is the only way you will succeed." I poured my anger and hurt into my coding, refining the privacy features that would distinguish my platform from competitors. The encryption protocols I developed worked on multiple levels, giving users unprecedented control over who could see their data and how it could be used. Then came the email that changed everything. A venture capitalist named Adam Mercer had seen some of my work on GitHub and wanted to discuss potential investment opportunities. I borrowed a suit from Jake, polished my worn shoes as best I could, and prepared a pitch that emphasized both the technical innovations and market potential of my privacy platform. The meeting took place in a sleek downtown office with floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furniture that made me acutely aware of my own disheveled appearance. But when I began presenting my prototype, something shifted. Adam and his partners leaned forward, asked insightful questions, and nodded appreciatively at the technical solutions I had developed. 2 weeks and 3 more meetings later, I secured $500,000 in seed funding, with terms that allowed me to maintain controlling interest in the company. I rented a small office space in Cambridge and hired 2 junior developers to accelerate the build process. The launch of our beta version exceeded all expectations. Privacy-conscious users flocked to the platform, attracted by our promise that their data would never be sold or mined for advertising purposes. A major tech publication featured us in their Startups to Watch section, praising our innovative approach to social media. Within 6 months, we had reached 1 million users and closed a second funding round that valued the company at $10 million. I moved into my own apartment, a modest one-bedroom that felt like a palace after months on Jake's couch. For the first time since losing my job, I could breathe again. Through occasional updates from Emily, I learned that our parents were facing their own financial challenges. My father's financial advisory firm had lost several major clients during the economic downturn. His investment recommendations had underperformed, damaging his professional reputation. Meanwhile, my mother was struggling to sell houses in a market where few people were buying. They had to cancel their annual trip to Florida, Emily told me during one of our coffee meetups, and Mom mentioned they might be downsizing soon. I nodded, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Part of me felt vindicated that my irresponsible career path had proven more resilient than my father's supposedly stable one. Another part of me remembered being raised in that house, the good moments interspersed among the criticism and conditional love. A month later, Emily delivered the news that solidified my future plans. They are putting the house on the market. Mom is listing it herself to save on commission. They need to cover some of Dad's investment losses. That night, staring at my company's bank statement, showing several $1 million in available capital, an idea took shape. It was petty, perhaps even cruel, but the wounded part of me could not resist its appeal. I would buy my parents' house without them knowing, become their landlord, and triple their rent. The next day, I contacted Marcus, my company's attorney, to discuss creating an anonymous LLC that could purchase real estate without revealing my identity. He explained the legal requirements and potential complications, but confirmed it was entirely possible. We will create Phoenix Holdings LLC with myself as the registered agent, Marcus explained. Your name will not appear on any public documents. But are you sure about this? Cedric, mixing business with personal vendettas rarely ends well. I assured him I had thought it through carefully. In reality, I was operating purely on emotional impulse, the accumulated resentment of 30 years, seeking an outlet. Through online property records, I found my childhood home listed at $450,000. I instructed Marcus to connect me with a discreet real estate agent who could handle the transaction. Sophia Wu, a sharp professional with no connections to my parents' social circle, agreed to represent Phoenix Holdings. Make a cash offer of $475,000, I told her. I want to ensure we beat any competing bids. The irony was exquisite, my mother, as the listing agent would be negotiating with Sophia without knowing she represented her own son. Within days, Sophia called to confirm the offer had been accepted. My parents had chosen the highest bidder, unaware they were selling their home of 30 years to the son they had evicted. During this period, my mother called to wish me a happy birthday. The conversation was strained with no mention of their financial situation or the house sale. We hope you are doing well, she said distantly. Your father sends his regards. No apology, no acknowledgement of how they had treated me. The final piece of my plan came together when Emily mentioned that our parents hoped to rent the house back from the new owners until they found a more affordable place. They are attached to the neighborhood, she explained. Dad's health has not been great, and they do not want the stress of moving twice. I instructed Sophia to indicate through the appropriate channels that Phoenix Holdings would indeed make the property available for rent after the sale closed. Then I established a property management company as a buffer between myself and my parents, ensuring all communications would go through professional third parties. The closing process went smoothly with all documents signed remotely. My parents moved most of their furniture and belongings into a small storage unit, expecting to continue living in the house as renters. When they emailed the property manager inquiring about lease terms, I had my answer prepared. The previous mortgage payment on the house had been approximately $1,500 monthly. I set the new rent at $4,500, triple what they had been paying, along with strict terms about maintenance responsibilities and late fees. I watched from a digital distance as my plan unfolded. The property manager sent the lease agreement with the inflated rental price to my parents' email. Within hours, a panicked phone call came into the management company, which I monitored through our business communication system. There must be some mistake, my father said, his voice tense. The previous owner's mortgage was around $1,500 a month. $4,500 is impossible. The property manager delivered the script I had prepared. The owner has determined this is the market rate for comparable properties in the area. Phoenix Holdings operates as a business, not a charity. My mother got on the phone, her real estate expertise coming through. I have been selling homes in this area for 20 years. Nothing rents for this amount. We were hoping for something closer to $2,000. I understand your concern, the manager replied professionally. However, the terms are non-negotiable. Several other potential tenants have expressed interest if you decide not to proceed. There was a long pause before my father responded, "We will sign the lease. Please send the final paperwork." I felt a surge of satisfaction knowing they had no choice but to accept my terms if they wanted to stay in their home. They had put prestige and financial success above their own son. Now they would pay for that choice literally. Over the following weeks, I occasionally drove by the house careful to remain unnoticed. My father's luxury sedan had been replaced by an older model car. The professional landscapers who once maintained the yard were gone, with my father now mowing the lawn himself on weekends. Small changes that indicated their downward financial trajectory. The first rent payment arrived exactly on time, likely depleting whatever savings they had managed to keep from the house sale. The second month, the payment came 2 days late, accompanied by an apologetic note about a bank transfer delay. By the third month, I received a notification from the property manager that my father had requested a meeting to discuss the rental terms. Mr. Reynolds has taken a second job working nights at the hospital administrative office, the manager reported. Mrs. Reynolds has returned to showing houses 7 days a week. They are requesting a reduction in rent. I instructed the manager to deny the request firmly but professionally. The terms of the lease are clear. Phoenix Holdings cannot make exceptions based on personal circumstances. Meanwhile, my company continued its meteoric rise. We secured a major partnership with a European tech consortium, expanding our user base internationally. A prominent business magazine featured my photo on their 30 under 30 list. The privacy platform I had coded on Jake's couch was now valued at over $30 million, with investment offers pouring in weekly. Yet despite this success, I found myself increasingly preoccupied with my parents' struggle. I set up a special email alert system to notify me of any communications regarding their property. I found myself checking these alerts before reviewing important business updates. By the fourth month, Emily had become suspicious of my unusual interest in our parents' financial situation. During a rare dinner together, she mentioned Mom and Dad are really struggling with that ridiculous rent. Dad is having blood pressure issues from working 2 jobs at his age. You seem oddly okay with their situation. I deflected her questions, but the seed of doubt had been planted. That night, I sent an anonymous Christmas card to my parents signed Phoenix Holdings LLC, conspicuously containing no discount offer or goodwill gesture, just a generic holiday greeting. When the 5th month rent payment came in 5 days late, I instructed the management company to send a formal warning letter, citing the lease terms regarding punctuality. Emily called me the next day, her voice tight with concern. Dad received a threatening letter from their landlord yesterday. Mom had a panic attack when she saw it. What kind of heartless corporation buys houses just to squeeze people who have lived there for decades? The question hit harder than expected. That weekend, Emily showed up unannounced at my condo. Her eyes widened as she took in the floor-to-ceiling windows, designer furniture, and state-of-the-art electronics. So this is where all that privacy app money goes, she said, walking around the space. Nice view of the harbor. While I prepared coffee, she browsed through some papers I had carelessly left on the kitchen counter. When I returned with our drinks, her expression had changed from impressed to horrified. Phoenix Holdings, she said, holding up a document with the LLC letterhead. Are you kidding me, Cedric? You are their landlord, the one charging them triple the market rate while Dad works himself into a heart attack. I tried to justify my actions, explaining how they had thrown me out when I had nothing, how they had called me a failure and a burden. This is not justice, Emily said, her voice breaking. It is cruelty. They made a terrible mistake with you, but this is beyond revenge. Dad was diagnosed with a heart condition last week. His doctor says it is stress-related. They are borrowing money from their friends to make your rent payments. The 6th month payment never came. Instead, the management company initiated the automatic eviction proceedings outlined in the lease. A legal notice was delivered to my parents' door by a sheriff's deputy, giving them 30 days to vacate or appear at a court hearing. Emily's call that night was the first time I had ever heard my composed sister cry. "Mom is having anxiety attacks. Dad is not sleeping. Is your revenge worth destroying them? They are still our parents despite their flaws." That night, I could not sleep. The success I had achieved felt hollow poisoned by the vindictiveness that had become my driving force. I found myself remembering moments from my childhood that did not fit my narrative of constant criticism. My father teaching me to ride a bike, spending an entire Saturday until I finally balanced without help. My mother sitting by my bed for 3 nights when I had pneumonia in 4th grade, applying cold compresses and reading me stories. The eviction hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. I decided to attend wearing glasses I did not need, and a hat pulled low sitting in the back of the courtroom to observe, without being recognized. The county courthouse was smaller than I expected, with worn wooden benches and fluorescent lighting that gave everyone a sickly pallor. I arrived early, selecting a seat in the back corner, where I could observe without being noticed. Other eviction cases were heard first, most lasting less than 5 minutes, as tenants failed to appear or judges ruled summarily in landlord's favor. When the clerk called Phoenix Holdings versus Reynolds, my breath caught. My parents entered from the side door, and I barely recognized them. In the 8 months since I had last seen them, they seemed to have aged years. My father walked with a slight limp, his once commanding posture now stooped. My mother's hands visibly trembled as she clutched her purse. Both wore clothes that appeared worn and slightly too large, as if they had lost weight. They approached the bench with the hesitant movements of people unused to court proceedings. My father, once so confident in all situations, spoke in a voice that cracked with emotion. "Your Honor, my wife and I have lived in this home for over 30 years. We raised our children there. Until recently, we owned it outright." The judge, an older woman, with silver hair and reading glasses perched on her nose, reviewed the file. "The paperwork indicates you have failed to make the most recent rent payment and have received formal eviction notice. Do you dispute this?" "No, Your Honor," my mother said softly. "We cannot dispute that. We simply ask for additional time. My husband has developed heart problems, and moving quickly would be dangerous for his health. We have a small apartment lined up, but it will not be available for 3 more weeks." The property manager representing Phoenix Holdings stated the company's position. "The lease terms are clear, Your Honor. Payment was due on the 1st. We are now approaching the end of the month with no payment received." I watched my father reach for my mother's hand, a gesture of solidarity I rarely witnessed growing up. Something shifted inside me seeing them support each other in their vulnerability. "Given the tenant's age and health concerns, I am granting a 2-week extension," the judge ruled. "Full payment plus late fees must be made by that date, or the eviction will proceed without further hearing." My parents nodded gratefully and slowly made their way out of the courtroom. I followed at a distance, watching as they stopped in the hallway to discuss their next steps. "We can sell your mother's silver service," my father said quietly, "and my golf clubs should bring something. We only need enough to cover the rent until the apartment is ready." "Richard, your father gave you those clubs," my mother protested. "They are just things, Diane," he replied with unexpected gentleness. "We still have each other." I ducked into a restroom to avoid being seen, my carefully constructed revenge fantasy crumbling around me. My grandfather's words came back to me, something he told me shortly before he died when I was 15. "The measure of a man is not how he treats those who help him, but how he treats those who hurt him." By that evening, my decision was made. The cycle of hurt needed to end, and I was the only one who could stop it. I instructed the property manager to send a formal email from Phoenix Holdings requesting a meeting with the tenants at my company headquarters. Emily called immediately after my parents received the email. "What is Phoenix Holdings planning now? Mom and Dad are terrified it is some kind of trap to expedite the eviction. Just make sure they attend," I told her. "Trust me on this." I selected our company's main conference room for the meeting, a space designed to impress investors with its wall of windows overlooking Boston Harbor custom wood table and state-of-the-art technology. From my office, I watched as the receptionist led my parents through the main workspace, their expressions a mixture of awe and intimidation as they took in the sleek surroundings and busy staff. When they entered the conference room, I was seated at the far end, my back to the door. I heard my mother's confused whisper, "I thought we were meeting someone from Phoenix Holdings." I turned my chair slowly to face them. For several seconds, they did not recognize me with my new haircut-tailored suit and the confidence that comes with success. Then my mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Cedric." My father stood frozen disbelief, etched on his face. "Mom, Dad, please sit down." I gestured to the chairs across from me. They sat hesitantly, confusion evident in their expressions. "I do not understand," my mother began. "Why are we meeting you at? What is this place?" "This is the headquarters of my company," I explained calmly. "The privacy platform I was developing in your basement before you evicted me." My father's eyes narrowed with dawning comprehension. "You brought us here to show off your success, to rub our noses in it, while we are being evicted." "Not exactly," I said, sliding a folder across the table. "I brought you here because I am Phoenix Holdings. I own your house. I have been your landlord for the past 6 months." The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's face drained of color. My father stood suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You have been torturing us," he demanded, voice rising. "Your own parents. Setting impossible rent. Threatening eviction when you know about my heart condition." "Please sit down," I said, maintaining my composure. "Yes, I bought the house through an anonymous LLC. Yes, I set the rent at 3 times the market rate. And yes, I knew exactly what I was doing." "How could you?" My mother whispered, tears forming. "How could I?" I repeated, my calm facade cracking slightly. "You threw me out when I was at my lowest point. Called me a failure. A burden. You gave me 30 days to leave after promising me 6 months to get back on my feet. You watched me pack my things in garbage bags without offering even a word of encouragement." My father sank slowly back into his chair, the anger in his face, giving way to something more complex. "We were trying to motivate you," he said defensively, though with less conviction. "We did not know you would end up homeless. We thought you had friends' connections." "I slept on a friend's couch for 3 months," I told them. "Worked at a coffee shop while developing my app at night. Ate ramen noodles for weeks straight to save every penny." I opened my laptop and turned the screen toward them, displaying my company's current valuation, $50 million, and growing. "This is what your burden of a son built after you gave up on him." My mother began crying openly now. "We made a terrible mistake, Cedric. I should have stood up to. Your father should have insisted you stay. My father always." The prouder one struggled visibly with his emotions. "We were raised to believe struggle builds character. My father was tough on me." And I thought. He trailed off, the justification sounding hollow, even to his own ears. "I was already struggling," I said quietly. "I needed support, not another obstacle." For the next hour, we talked more honestly than we ever had before. They explained their fear watching me unemployed, seeing echoes of relatives who had failed to launch and remained dependent on family into middle age. I shared the pain of feeling conditionally loved, valued only for achievements and financial success. "What happens now?" my father finally asked. "Are you still evicting us?" "No," I said, sliding a new document across the table. "This is a revised lease agreement. The rent is set at $2,000, which is fair market value. It includes an option to purchase the house back after 2 years at a reasonable price." My mother looked up surprised. "You would sell it back to us?" "With conditions," I clarified. "Weekly family dinners, monthly family counseling sessions, with a therapist I have already selected, and your active participation in a community outreach program my company is launching to help unemployed tech workers." My father examined the document carefully, his financial advisor habits reasserting themselves. "These terms are fair," he acknowledged reluctantly before extending his hand across the table. "You drive a harder bargain than your old man ever did." We scheduled our first dinner for the following week at my condo. The evening was awkward, conversation stilted as we navigated our new relationship dynamic. The first counseling session revealed generational patterns of conditional love in my father's family, helping us understand without excusing the damage done. Slowly, things began to change. My father, once dismissive of my computer hobby, began offering valuable insights on our company's financial strategy. My mother, who had always deferred important decisions to my father, revealed a talent for office design as we planned our company's expansion. 6 months after the courthouse revelation, I transferred the house into a family trust that included all 3 of us as beneficiaries. My father's health improved as his stress levels decreased. My mother started a small real estate consulting business, helping seniors downsize thoughtfully work. She found far more fulfilling than chasing commissions. Last month, we took our first family vacation in over a decade, renting a cabin in the mountains where we hiked, played board games, and continued healing our relationships. There are still difficult moments, old patterns that resurface during stress, but we now have tools to recognize and address them. Looking back, I realize my revenge scheme brought me no satisfaction. The temporary power I felt as their anonymous landlord was nothing compared to the genuine connection we are slowly rebuilding. Success means nothing without people to share it, with even the people who hurt you but are trying to do better. The company continues to thrive, but my measures of success have changed dramatically. My grandfather was right all along. True strength is not found in revenge, but in the courage to forgive and create something better from the broken pieces. Have you ever had to forgive family members who hurt you? Share your story in the comments below. If this journey of reconciliation resonated with you, please hit the subscribe button and like this video so others facing similar family conflicts can find it. Consider sharing with someone who might be struggling with the choice between revenge and healing. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that sometimes rebuilding family relationships creates bonds stronger than what existed before the break.